Hey folks, if you're an avid appreciator of arcadey action, this episode's for you, since I'll be talking about the Segment Twins, a recently released hack-and-slash hybrid, which puts a unique spin on character swap mechanics. But, was this twin tale a treat, or did this segment suck? I'm your host Arlian, let's find out together. The Mush. While these walking fungi might seem harmless at a glance, their penchant for terrorizing with technology was enough to inspire a new vocation, that of the Mush Hunters. Among them are a pair of twin sisters who've done well to eke out a fungicidal living, at least until their most recent outing, where they find themselves falling prey to a devious trap. And that is it. That is the story. While I normally do my best to tease the premise of a game and what it has to hook you with, there is nothing else to latch on to narratively once the opening intro has passed and the game's excuse plot has been presented. Yes, there is technically an ending, but it really doesn't amount to much. That's not to say all of this isn't cute, but this is definitely a mechanics-first style of game. So, let's tackle them, shall we? First off, when I called Segment Twins arcade-like, that isn't an exaggeration. The vast crux of your time will be spent clearing a series of back-to-back combat arenas with a small repertoire of abilities based on whether you're using the Gunslinger or Swordmaster character. That said, there's a few factors that add a bit of complexity to the experience. First off, both characters' initial movesets start out basic with a simple combo and an evasive dash. That said, as you acquire experience and boost their shared levels, you'll unlock a gap closer, an escape move, and an ultimate attack. All in real time, it sounds basic and simple enough. There's just one little problem. If you get hit and don't have a shield, you lose experience, potentially robbing you of a skill while you're in the thick of things and setting you up for an equally punishing follow-up. As a system, it definitely serves to reward skillful play and punishes recklessness, especially given that shields are a resource shared between both of the sisters. Speaking of which, let's tackle the other major defining feature of Segment Twins, their approach to character swapping. See, rather than having the player choose which character they're going to tackle a level with, or strictly relegating it to a swap button, the active character is instead toggled by which segment of the floor the player's standing. This adds an altogether tactical element to the experience, as you can weave back to a location, change your loadout to one that's range-oriented, and then use a gap closer to swap to a swordsman, or inversely, swap to the gunner's loadout and use the knockback from shooting to disengage and push yourself into a different partition of the arena in order to gain access to the Swordmaster's abilities. Admittedly, you do have the ability to change which segment of the floor is designated to which character, but this ability is on cooldown, which means it's not something you can readily rely on. Plus, there are benefits to camping on segments without swapping. Doing so will gradually charge a bar associated with the opposite character that you're using, thus empowering their abilities when you tag out with things like boosted area of effects or increased number of projectiles. It's a lot of fun to figure out all in all. As for the areas themselves, well, there's 5 different zones you can explore, each comprised of 21 stages. While this may sound like a lot at a glance, in actuality these are fairly short and simple endeavors with a focus on enemy arrangements and different segment designs for the floor. Still, while this sounds like it would be a recipe for tedium, Segment Twins does endeavor to mix things up by adding new mechanics, whether it's the inclusion of environmental hazards to add yet another layer of chaos to the battlefield, or even enemy damage shields introduced late game, which make them vulnerable to a specific combat style. Getting through these segments flawlessly and stylishly gets significantly more complicated the further you get. And yet, the effort does feel fairly rewarding, though it's less a matter of bragging rights in the shiny-looking S rank that plops down into the middle of the field, and more because said S ranks are essentially a treasure chest. Something which is only really important due to the shop. See, every so often you'll come across the shop stage. These are useful since they let you spend the currency you've accrued from enemies' crates and ranks to recover shield, health, and even buy extra lives. Not that I needed too much help on that front, since I was swimming in extra lives due to gaining a fresh one every 50k points accrued. That said, the most powerful option in a shop's inventory are the permanent ones, since you can snag cooldown reductions, ramp up your speed, boost your survivability, and drastically up your damage. To the point that you can actually max out everything if you're a cautious spender, which can in turn shift the overall difficulty of the game. But even then, that simply paved the way for a different sort of challenge, because getting a decent style score meant I couldn't simply blow up a room for the sake of convenience. Though it's not like the traditional mob battles are all Segment Twins has up its sleeve. For one thing, there's mini-games scattered throughout each region. Not only are these fairly varied and provide some fun breathers from the battles, they also serve as a final opportunity to earn some currency before you hit a shop. That said, my absolute favorite moments in Segment Twins were rooted in the boss battles. While there's only 5 in total, each of them are quite distinct, to the point that I didn't really feel like I was seeing attacks or mechanics being reused. Something which does add a bit of appeal to the unlockable boss rush mode, but that's the gameplay side of things, so it's about time to summarize the style, and on a visual front, I do enjoy this game. There's something about its sense of presentation, whether it's the character or enemy design, that's a fair bit of fun. I also was rather partial to the overall stage design, as while it was simple, the splits in it made for some interesting visuals, especially when you take into account the backgrounds. That said, my favorite aesthetic element was the audio. While there wasn't a tremendous amount of variety, I still found what was there to be quite fun. So, how about my final thoughts on the game? Well, if you're looking for something fun to sink your teeth into for an afternoon, I do think that this will fit the bill. It knows it's not a narrative masterpiece, so it instead focuses on providing a simple, snappy game to pick up and play. Something which is great for a short, casual play session, but which also fares well for a prolonged one, given how much progress and variety you'll wind up seeing even in one sitting. That said, I will admit that beyond that initial playthrough, I wasn't quite as drawn to the idea of continuing. Yes, there was a chapter select, a hard mode, and even the boss rush, but none of the options felt like they'd overall changed the experience enough to warrant a second playthrough. Like, yes, again, I really did enjoy those boss fights, but at the same time, I feel that I did tackle them suitably enough for my own liking. So, while I can certainly say that this was a hit for my initial jaunt through, it does lack a bit of staying power. Anywho, thanks for tuning in! If you have something to say, leave a comment. If you enjoy my efforts to create new indie reviews and interviews, hit subscribe and the bell. For a link to my Discord, the Crit Hit Cauldron, check the description. There's also a link to my Patreon if you want to see reviews early, or just want to support the channel, and to my merch house for neat swag like the Crit Hit coffee mugs. That said, I'll catch you on the next episode of Crit Hit. Take care till then, folks.